I'm Richard Morris from Canberra, Australia. In 2014, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. After taking the dietary advice of the Australian Diabetes Association, I became more diabetic.
No!
Yes.
Oh.
I did some research which led me to the ketogenic diet. Spoiler alert, I reversed my type 2 diabetes by drastically reducing my carbohydrate intake and increasing my consumption of healthy fats. In 2016, I was determined to help my buddy Carl by showing him what I did and the science behind it.
Hey, y'all, that's me. I'm Carl Franklin from the United States. I also used to be a type 2 diabetic, but not quite as severely as Richard.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I devoured all the info Richard sent me, and after a mutual friend went keto to address prostate cancer, I also went on the ketogenic diet. That was in February of 2016. By April, I was in full swing reversing my diabetes.
We're not doctors, so we don't give medical advice. We're just a couple of dudes on the internet who reverse their diabetes by following a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, and we just want to share our experiences and what we know about the science behind the ketogenic diet.
So we started this podcast to chronicle Carl's journey and to bring solid information to those curious about this kind of dietary lifestyle.
Right. And now we have over 200 podcast episodes, some of which have been downloaded hundreds of thousands of times.
Mm-hmm.
And after failing miserably on Facebook...
Miserably, yes.
We gave our Facebook page a Viking funeral and moved our online community to the ketogenic forums, where now tens of thousands of people share their experiences.
We also founded an annual ketogenic festival called Keto Fest.
Yeah.
Carl and I are both software developers, and we normally found ourselves at software conferences several times a year, and we tended to gravitate towards the conversations that happen in the hallways. Sure, the talks are great, but it's the community that we enjoy the most.
So Keto Fest is designed as a conference to discuss the latest research of keto diets, and it's also a festival celebrating the ketogenic lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And right now you can put yourself on the mailing list to be notified about Keto Fest 2022, which we plan to host in October 2022. Just go to ketofest.com to add your name. And as a side note, if you tried to sign up before and got an error, try it again. We've since fixed those issues.
We've fed the gerbils.
And that's the royal we. Go to ketofest.com and add your name and email address to the list.
So, Carl, what is a ketogenic diet?
Well, it's a diet where instead of burning sugar and starch for energy, our cells preferentially burn fat. That produces molecules called ketones that our bodies use for fuel.
That's right. Our primary molecular fuels are glucose, which we make from carbohydrates, and fatty acids, which we make from fat. Our cells have two modes. In one, they burn glucose and make fat, and in the other, they burn fatty acids and make ketones.
But you don't have to eat a high-fat diet to be ketogenic, right?
Well, when you're starting out, you may have to, but then in a few weeks, as you become better adapted to burning fat for energy, when all of your calories come from fatty acids, the amount that you need to eat becomes coupled to satiety, which integrates not only the variable amount of energy that your body needs to run every day, but also the amount of fat that can be drawn down from storage.
So how many carbohydrates do we need to restrict ourselves to in order to get into that state?
Yeah, that depends. Some of us who are metabolically disordered need to get below 20 grams a day. Someone who's quite metabolically flexible can probably eat as much as 100 grams a day.
Okay. How about other nutrients like protein, minerals, and essential cofactors like vitamins and essential fats?
Well, for protein, you need from 1 to 1.5 grams for every kilogram of lean mass that you have. And beyond that, you just waste the excess by turning it into energy instead of using fatty acids. As for the other essential nutrients, if you're eating fatty meats or eggs, plus a few leafy green vegetables, you'll get most of those because the organisms that made those foods have already concentrated a lot of essential cofactors.
Ketogenic diets are varied and delicious.
Yeah.
They can be vegetarian or carnivore, home-cooked or takeout. Hot cuisine.
Hot cuisine!
Always cracks me up. Or just bacon and eggs.
As long as your carbohydrates are low enough.
And hey, if you're an absolute beginner, check out our Starting Keto episode for more information at start.2keto.com. So Richard, how have you been this week?
I've been pretty good. I've been researching protein leverage, which is it's a hypothesis that became popular about 2 years ago. It's been in the literature for quite some time, but I'm looking into some of the background, and I can guarantee that the protein leverage hypothesis will be some malarkey in the future episode.
Oh, okay.
Yes, but other than that, no, things have been good. How about you, Carl?
First of all, I got to tell you, I really, really liked listening to Stephen Finney's interview with you.
It was good, wasn't it?
It was, and it was a great reminder of the things that your body does in the absence of carbohydrates that collectively just make you more healthy. It was just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah, I tell one thing about the interview. I was so nervous because Stephen Finney is the original gangster. I mean, he's the OG.
Guy.
And I wasn't that experienced with interviewing. And so you can tell how nervous I was because I was like blurting everything out, like Steve Carell in Bruce Almighty,
fanboy.
And the funny thing was that as I was, so I always listen to podcasts at double speed, and this one was even worse because I was getting faster and faster, and it was like every time Professor Finney almost couldn't finish a thought before I was on to the next thing, and I was so excited about the whole thing that by the end of it, the pair of us were racing each other to come up with ideas. So, it's still one of my favorite episodes, and that's why I chose it.
Yeah, one of the highlights of my life actually was having Professor Finney come to the VIP party for Keto Fest 2019.
That was
and serving him my food. I have a picture of him in line for beef. Nice. The sous vide beef.
72-hour sous vide beef, yeah.
Right, and I also remember quite vividly after dinner just going out on the deck where we had, some tables set up for people to eat, and he was just holding court with about 8 or 9 people, and I thought, we are the luckiest 9 people in the world right now to be able to just sit down, have a meal, and talk about whatever. And of course, he was doing the talking.
He was, yeah.
He was, yeah. Everybody was wrapped.
The VIP parties at Keto Fest are something special because they're limited. There's only a few people that we can fit on your deck. So, from the Keto Fest, the people at Keto Fest, and the other thing is that leading up to Keto Fest, we do a lot of preparation work, and we have a lot of people volunteers coming in to help us out with getting Keto Fest up and running. And a lot of those people are all at the VIP party as well. And these are people who are, long-termers in the ketogenic community. So it's almost a who's who. You're walking around the VIP party and like, there's Stephen Finney talking to Professor Richard David Feynman. Oh, there's Eric Westman.
Yeah, I know.
It's
crazy.
It's remarkable. So it is a real special part of the whole Keto Fest experience.
In other news, I successfully quashed my morning hunger twice this week with peaches and cream Ketochow.
On the Ketochow. Nice. So tell me how you make it.
So first of all, somebody asked, what's the recipe for Ketochow? It's a product. And if you just Google Bing it, you'll find it. But you can buy it on Amazon too. It's basically a powder, but it's a nutritionally balanced powder that has vitamins, nutrients, minerals, protein, and you mix it with heavy cream or butter and water.
Right. Yeah.
And then you blend it up and put it in the fridge for at least 30 minutes. And what I've been doing is I've been making it before I go to bed, putting it in the fridge. So first thing in the morning, rather than, making myself breakfast if I'm, hungry, I'll just grab some of that, and man, it's not 2:00 in the afternoon before I actually feel like eating.
Yeah, it's a meal replacement. It's not
right.
It's not something you have with a meal, but I generally use MCT oil and a little bit of cream with mine, but and then of course water. It's mostly water. So
I said this last week that Kelly, my wife, really likes the chicken soup. And so what I do is if I make
butter, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I make it with butter, but I also, instead of water, use chicken stock. So I make my own stock, of course.
Right, of course.
So I use stock and I use butter, melted butter, and that just makes the best chicken soup. It's like a thick cream of chicken soup.
Nice.
It's a really good dinner. It's a really good dinner. You throw some mushrooms in there if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
nice.
Good. So that's what I've been doing. This is a very special episode for me. We're going to get to it in just a minute. But first, we have this little matter of reading the All right. Well, I'm going to read a post from July 2018. This is by Chris Esquilin. I think that's how you pronounce on the forum. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Title is To Keto Forums Newbie, My 100-Pound Weight Loss in 7 Months Story. And there's a picture of him, and he looks absolutely amazing. He says, Hi, Keto Forum family. My name is Chris Esquilin. I've been listening to the 2 Keto Dudes for a little while now, but this is my first post.
After Chris, if you're listening.
Yeah. After reaching my highest weight last year of 349 pounds, I knew that I desperately needed a change. My family has a history of high blood pressure, diabetes, etc., and I don't want to go down that path. My younger brother started keto last year and lost a great amount of weight. We had known about keto for a few years, but were always very skeptical. After hitting our highest weight, my wife and I decided to dive right in and go keto. I've been very grateful for the podcast, the forums, and all the resources available to help keto newbies in the journey. After a couple months on the journey, I started incorporating high-intensity training as well as weight training at the gym.
Nice.
That, along with intermittent fasting, has really helped me drop significant weight. I checked the scale over the weekend, and I'm now at 249 pounds. I'm so excited to be down 100 pounds, and I plan to keep going. I have about another 30 to 40 pounds to hit my goal weight, and I'm as motivated and excited as ever. Thank you for all the support on this forum, and I look forward to seeing your stories, Chris.
Nice. Well done, Chris. That's about the same amount of weight that I lost. And I started probably maybe 9 pounds lighter than you. I was actually 10 pounds lighter than you and lost almost the same amount of weight. And I was about 30 to 40 pounds away from my goal weight and or what I thought was my goal weight. I pretty much plateaued there, and I sort of went up or down depending on how much exercise that I was doing. But for the most part, I discovered that what I thought was my goal was unrealistic given the amount of muscle that I had on my body from carrying around a 350-pound body. Yeah. So, it took probably another 6 years to start for my muscles to like my calves and quads are just massive, and that's not a good thing. That's just from carrying around a 350-pound body and cycling up hills with it and that. So it took about 6 years for that to start to come down to a more normal size. So it doesn't happen quickly once you get down to the point that you're at. The goal really at this point, if I was to go back in time to where you are, I would. And what I would tell myself is try not to think about a weight loss goal, but think about a lifestyle goal. Think about, okay, what do I want the rest of my life to look at in terms of how much exercise I'm doing, how much weight I'm lifting, and what kind of food I'm eating. And that's really the goal now, is to start to build the content of your lifestyle around a goal.
Even the word goal is kind of misleading, because it's you reach the finish line, you say, okay, I did it. Now what? Now your life begins, So it's not really a goal. It's a lifestyle, as Richard said. For example, I'm not diabetic, but I have put on weight since I lost it, but I'm still healthy, relatively healthy. Yeah. Because I don't want to be diabetic, right? I'm going to be eating keto for the rest of my life.
Well, as Professor Finney told us last week, the body hits a certain homeostasis, and the homeostasis level is different when you remove carbohydrates from the question. And in Chris's case, in my case, it's 100 pounds different, so it's a big deal.
Yeah,
so.
It is. And speaking of exercise, I recently cleaned out my garage.
Oh, that's hard work.
Garage, yeah, I know. The garage is it's a great house, but the garage was never finished, and it was built in 1989, and so there's a lot of old fiberglass hanging out of the walls and stuff, and it's just kind of dirty and stuff. So we decided that we're going to have it finished, sheetrocked and all that. Put in some real lights and making it a good space. But first it has to be dunged out. And we've cleaned it out a couple of times, but this time we really got rid of all those old computers from the 90s that nobody's ever going to boot up or use again, like old flatbed scanners that don't work anymore and things, just tons of crap. So I found in there a Total Gym that I had bought that I had never put together. So that's going to happen. We're going to put that together.
Excellent.
I believe it or not, I had a podcast recording booth in my bedroom because that was like the only place quiet enough in the house. And then once I built this studio in here where I am right now, one of the rooms is my studio. We removed that. So we have this empty space in the bedroom. I'm going to set up the Total Gym in there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you sheetrock your garage, then that would be a good place for your gym as well.
Once that happens, sure.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So that's it. Let's talk Thanksgiving. This episode, for me, I chose it because this was the first Thanksgiving that I cooked ketogenic. And, you and I both offered some great advice for cooking. And, for me, it was about the turkey, the stuffing, the gravy. You have a great recipe for squash. So if I had to do anything differently, I would have made the stuffing with Fox Hill Kitchen's croutons rather than Mahler's low-carb bread. I've since ditched it because it contains wheat. I also would have used glucomannan powder, also known as konjac flour, rather than xanthan gum to thicken the gravy.
Right.
These days, it's glucomannan all the way.
It's really hard to get in Australia, but I managed to get some last time I was in America, and I'm starting to run low. So I'm going to have to pick some up next time I come over for Keto Fest.
Yeah. So I remember, did you listen to the show? Because you were like, oh, man, you're making me want to cook a turkey now.
It's turkey season.
Yeah. Are you going to do some, of course, it's not turkey season for you. It's springtime, but in the fall, in the autumn, or as closest to autumn as you get, are you going to do a sort of a turkey dinner thing?
So what we do is we can pick up a goose around Christmas time.
Okay.
And
but that's like winter. That's summertime.
Summertime,
for you.
Summer.
So I always
just
liked
towards
it.
the end of summer. Yeah,
I liked it as Christmas in Australia is like we throw some shrimp on the barbie.
Pretty much.
Yeah, go to the beach.
Well, traditionally, we still do the hot meals, which is kind of stupid. But for Christmas, it's also in the is in the middle of the summer, and we decorate with snowmen and
That's really weird.
Snow frosting on windows and everything.
I'm dreaming of a hot Christmas.
Yeah.
A hot Christmas.
Hot cuisine.
All right. Well, let's pick up from episode 39 where we started talking about Thanksgiving. Cooking has been on my mind today because
you've had a big day.
I did have a big day. I've been researching what I was going to do for Thanksgiving for a couple of days. And then I went shopping this morning and I spent the whole day in the kitchen.
Nice.
And I had friends and family over for dinner. It was about 7 of us and served Thanksgiving dinner early.
We're about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. We're recording currently in early November. And Thanksgiving's towards the end of November, right?
Yep, that's right. November 24th this year on Thursday.
Now, I'm Australian. We don't have Thanksgiving in Australia, but I lived in America for 8 years, and so I In fact, within 2 months of moving to the States, I had my first Thanksgiving with a Cuban-American family, and that was intense.
Yeah.
But so I got an early introduction to it, yeah.
It's one of those holidays that has always stuck with me. It's an American holiday, but many cultures have both a holiday in which they give thanks, but also maybe an autumn festival. And it might be the same holiday, but there's generally, it's all about seasonal foods.
Yeah, it's like post-harvest, really, isn't it? So you do all the work of get the harvest in, and then you have a big feast and be thankful for the year's bounty. Yeah,
for the bounty, exactly. And and Canadians have Thanksgiving, but they have it in October, and it's called Thanksgiving.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's different. It's different. In America, we've got this lore built up around Thanksgiving. The Pilgrims came over on the Mayflower, and they settled, and they all starved to death. And if it weren't for Squanto and the Indians who showed them how to plant corn, and maybe they had some pheasant and stuff, and they had this big peace offering, and then we beat the living snot out of them. So.
Well, they did introduce you to corn, so those carbs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I found that I was reading a great book by Bill Bryson called Made in America.
Okay.
And he tells the story of Tisquantum, or Squanto for short. But Tisquantum in 1614 was captured in Massachusetts by Captain Thomas Hunt, who was a lieutenant for Captain John Smith, who lured him and 23 other friendly Native Americans on board Hunt's ship with the promise of trade. And then, of course, they locked him up, and there's the record is vague whether he landed in Spain or not, but eventually he made his way to England, and there he was an interpreter for Captain Thomas Dermer.
Wow.
And so this was all happening before the Pilgrims landed in March of 1621.
Wow.
But anyway, let's talk turkey, shall we?
So Thanksgiving's not Thanksgiving without turkey, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Why is that?
Apparently because of the lore, right? The first Thanksgiving was between the settlers and the Native Americans, and they basically cooked a bird of some kind. Most people will say it's a pheasant, but, in the popular culture, it was a turkey because turkeys are everywhere in America.
And turkeys are American.
They are.
Uniquely American, whereas pheasants get all over the place,
Yeah. So what I've done for turkey since I can remember when, and I can't ever remember, it's been probably 20 years I've been cooking a turkey this way, using the Julia Child method.
Okay.
And I talked a little bit about this on the show where I talked about the stuffing, and we'll get to that. But the basic idea is that you debone it. You take out the backbone, which is connected to the breast.
Yeah.
And you basically cut down the sides of the backbone and snip it out.
So it's like a spatchcock then, is it? You're spatchcocking it?
Well, spatchcock takes it a little bit further.
Okay.
And you take out the backbone and then you split it so it's flat.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So it's one step toward spatchcocking, but not quite all the way. So basically then you take the legs off at the thighs.
Yep.
And take the femur out of the thighs. That's the thigh bone.
Yep.
And replace it with herbs and salt and sort of roll that up together. And you actually end up cooking the breast and wing over stuffing. And then you end up cooking the legs and thighs together in a separate pan, which takes less time than the breast does.
Yeah.
So you can wait a half an hour before you put that in the oven.
Yeah.
And the whole thing takes half the time of a traditional turkey where everything's roasted overnight. But the whole trick of getting a turkey done right is you want it tender and juicy on the inside, not dry, and then have that crispy skin on the outside. That's the whole holy grail.
The skin's the good stuff.
So this year, however, I decided to do all thighs.
Okay.
Because you know what? Breast meat is kind of just boring and dry and proteiny.
Yeah.
And I want something moist, meaty, and fatty.
And everybody else likes breast meat. So, if you're buying your poultry in pieces, then thigh meat's cheaper.
Yeah, that's right. So what I did was I bought 4 thighs with the bones in, just the thighs, not the drumsticks.
Yep.
And then I also bought 4 chicken breasts. Well, 2 split chicken breasts, so 4 quarters.
Okay.
And I cooked those along with the thighs because for the people who wanted white meat. And there you go. I actually did that because I couldn't find any fresh turkey breast in the grocery store today that looked like I wanted to eat it. So here's what I did. I didn't have to take the bird apart, but I did have to remove the bones from the thighs. And having a good turkey experience for me is all about the gravy.
Yeah.
The gravy is key. And you really can't make gravy sing unless you make your own stock.
Yeah.
You make your own bone broth.
Yeah.
And so what I do for that is I take those femur bones and I put them in some olive oil. I added some sage and rosemary, and I just cooked them on medium heat in a pot. And I let that go and turned it over and let them get crispy and brown. And man, that starts smelling so good. You get the Maillard reaction going, and those bones get all crispy. Then I add some garlic, chopped garlic, and about a half a gallon of water, and bring that all to a boil. As soon as it gets to a boil, reduce it down to a simmer and let it cook down. And I still want to see bubbles, because I want the steam evaporating. Yeah. So it's reducing and getting really delicious.
One trick you can do with reducing sauces is you get a desk fan and you put it over the pot and you have it blow across the pot. And what it does is it takes away all of the steam that's above the pot, so that it encourages more to be produced.
Wow, that's a great idea.
It works really well. Yeah, you only need a small little fan.
That's so great. I'm going to do that next time.
Move that air.
Wow,
it'll double the speed.
No kidding. Oh, that's great. Okay, so then you lay the thighs open, and you put your herbs in there. And I like fresh herbs like sage and rosemary. If you want to put a little garlic in there too, you can do that. A little salt and pepper, whatever you like. But the sage is the most critical herb here, I think.
Yeah, it's very easy to grow your own herbs, and it's one of the first things if you were deciding to grow your own plants. Herbs would be one of the first because they can take a beating. You can have black thumbs and still grow parsley.
Now, I also cooked these chicken breasts, as I said, and what I did for those is I put them in a zip bag with water, salt, and garlic powder, and I just put them in the fridge to let them brine for a couple hours.
Sure.
And, brining overnight would have been better, but a couple hours is still pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I took those out of the bag and patted them dry so they didn't have any water on them.
Nice. Yeah.
Took all of these things, the breasts in one pan and the legs in another pan, the turkey in another pan. But before I put them in the pan, I took about 2 teaspoons of bacon grease from my stash and I spread that all over the bottom of the pan.
Nice.
That just is going to...
How good is bacon grease?
Oh, so good. Yeah, health food.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, it's a good diet.
I know, it's terrible. So
you got bacon smeared on the pan, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I got bacon spread on the pan. I put the thighs in one pan. I put the chicken breasts in another. Those go in a 350 oven. And for me, they were small, so it was about an hour and a half total. But bigger thighs, you might have to cook for 2 hours, maybe 2.5, maybe 2.25. You'll have to check them. So while that's going, I'm simmering down my stock. And about 30 minutes before the meat is done, I strain the stock through a strainer or a sieve or a mesh or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And so now I just have the liquid. And I just put that aside to cool. Now, there's a reason that it's got to cool. Okay. Because I'm going to thicken it with xanthan gum.
Ah, so you don't use a roux?
No.
Which is traditional ways of using flour, right?
Yeah, traditional way is using flour. And I never really liked flour gravy. It was nice and thick, but it leaves that aftertaste, that chalky, floury aftertaste, right? The texture.
That particular kind of white gravy is a very American thing. I noticed. I'd never seen it before I moved to America, and then I saw it everywhere. So for people outside America, you probably wouldn't be used to it, but it's a white gravy.
Yeah, it's basically flour and butter and salt and some. If you're really terrible, you use not stock, but you'd use bouillon. It's just nasty.
Okay.
Yeah. So after the stock cools, and I'm talking 20 minutes at least, and it can't be really hot. Yeah. I'm going to thicken it with xanthan gum by dissolving a quarter teaspoon of xanthan gum in a little bit of olive oil per cup of liquid.
Okay.
So I got about 4 cups of liquid, maybe 5.
So about a teaspoon.
So I used about a teaspoon. Yep.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is put that all in a blender and then add the oil with the xanthan gum in there and then blend it. And if it's hot, when you blend it, guess what happens?
Goes everywhere.
Yeah, because the steam pops the top off.
Right.
And hot liquid goes everywhere, including on you.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But you only do that maybe 3 or 4 or 5 or 15 times before you learn your lesson.
Oh, once was enough. But what's happening in the blender is that you're going to emulsify that oil with the xanthan gum, and you're not going to have any granules.
Yeah.
And the typical problem people have with xanthan gum is they think they can just sprinkle it into hot liquid and stir it, and that doesn't work.
No.
Yeah. You're going to end up with little lumps.
Clumps, yeah.
Clumps and lumps, and not very thick. So there you go. Now, here's what happens when the turkey comes out. You take all the drippings from that pan and just add it to the gravy.
Yeah. Of course you do.
Add it to the gravy.
Yep.
And then you salt and pepper to taste and bring it to the table because you got some hungry people there that want to taste that turkey.
It's not so much gravy now, it's liquid schmaltz.
It's schmaltz. That's exactly what it is. That's the Yiddish word for chicken fat. And
Nice.
Just wonderful. So there's the turkey. All right, let's move on to the stuffing.
Yeah.
I talked about the stuffing before on the show. This is a low-carb Thanksgiving sausage stuffing. Some people call it dressing.
Sure.
So this is exactly the recipe that I would make before I transformed myself with a ketogenic diet, except for the bread. Right. And I use Mahler's low-carb bread for the croutons, and everything else is exactly the same as you'd make stuffing. So if you have a favorite way to make stuffing with chestnuts or mushrooms or whatever, I like to use sage sausage.
Yeah.
Along with the mirepoix, which is chopped celery, carrots, and mushrooms and garlic, sauteed in an entire stick of butter.
Of course.
And then I just nail it with fresh sage and some thyme and rosemary and some black olives, maybe some onion powder. And before you add the chicken stock, you need to have the bread in there. So what I do is I toast about 7 or 8 pieces of Mahler's low-carb bread, and I chop it up into cubes. So all of that goes together in your pan with the chicken stock, and now you've got a lot of liquid in there, so you've got to sort of simmer it down.
Sure.
As you're doing that, you know, the liquid gets absorbed in the bread, and it all just gets really happy together, and you have plenty of opportunities to taste it.
I'll bet you do.
And what's best is that once all that liquid is burned off, there's still the fat in there. There's still the butter. So you turn it down on low, and some of it's going to stick to the bottom of the pan and get crispy.
Fond.
The fond, So you just, you can keep scraping it off if you want, or you just let it crust up.
Yeah.
And it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
If you want to do the traditional stuffing the turkey, you can do that too. Yeah. Just put a mound of stuffing on a pan, put the breast over it, and cook it that way.
We don't do that these days much with birds. I think this Christmas we're probably going to try and get a goose for the first time in a long time. And we rarely stuff the actual birds with stuffing mix. Normally just chuck a lemon in there or something like that just to keep the carcass expanded out a bit.
That's a great idea too.
Yeah, prevent it from collapsing in on itself. And then that lemon at the end of it is sort of taken up all of the flavors of the bird, and you can then just mash the lemon into a stock or something.
Yeah.
It's delicious. But the actual stuffing we cook in a pan on the side by itself, because the thing is if you're putting it into a raw bird and then cooking the bird, if you don't get the bird fully cooked, then the inside of that stuffing is inedible. So it's such a horrible, wasteful thing to do to such delicious, potentially delicious food. So
Right. And the good thing about putting a bird over stuffing is that the fat drips down onto the stuffing and further flavors it.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's what gravy does too. So
true.
Yeah. Okay, next I did some sides. Let's start with the broiled Brussels sprouts. I've done this before on 2 Keto Dudes. And Richard, it turns out if you take any vegetable, cut it up, add a little olive oil, salt and pepper, and blast it under a broiler, guess what? It's going to taste awesome.
It's delicious.
So you've done broiled vegetables as well. I mean, Brussels sprouts is just the beginning. You can take peppers or mushrooms, onions, bok choy, parsnips, whatever you want, and blast them in the broiler, and they taste great. It's a shame that we've been fed vegetables that taste so crappy all our lives.
I know. I mean, that cream spinach that I did I think maybe about 10 episodes ago, we did a cream spinach. Yeah. It's one of my go-tos. And I just love spinach.
Yeah.
I never would have thought. I like mushrooms too. There's all these foods that until I learned to cook and learned to find out what my own taste preferences were horrible steamed vegetables that you get in restaurants.
Yeah, because people think vegetables, well, they can't have any fat on them. Otherwise, what's the point? No. Throw that fat on there.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So a couple of classic sides for me, the cream spinach, as I mentioned. Also, I did a recipe once with the potamarrons, which they're like a winter squash in Australia.
Right.
Well, they're actually a French winter squash that you pick at harvest time, and then you can eat over the whole of the winter. And I just put one of those in an oven with a little bit of butter, and then I just slide a knife in to make sure that they're perfectly done. Very easy to cook, and you can even combine the two. You can even put cream spinach in your potamarron and serve it on a plate. So,
and we'll post the recipe to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, so next I want to talk about mashed potatoes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
First of all, it's not the potatoes why you like mashed potatoes. Okay, it is if you're carb addicted, but the flavor isn't in the potatoes. It's in the garlic and the butter and everything. The potato is just a blank canvas on which to put flavor, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you start with something more flavorful, like, say, cauliflower, and mash that up, you can actually have something that don't compare it to mashed potatoes. Just compare it to mashed cauliflower. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
Now, I took this an extra step because a lot of cauliflower mash recipes that I see out there require you to boil or steam the cauliflower.
Right.
And what that does, it adds a lot of water.
Dilutes the flavor.
And doesn't really bring out the flavor. It dilutes the flavor, And, of course, you don't want runny mashed anything. So why do that? So what I did was, guess what?
What?
Broiled them.
Broiled them.
Yeah, I chopped up cauliflower and I added, guess what? Olive oil, garlic, salt, and pepper. And I put it under the broiler.
Carl's special seasoning.
Yeah. The difference between this and the Brussels sprouts is the Brussels sprouts go directly under the broiler.
Okay.
And this I put in the middle rack.
A little bit more indirect.
A little bit more indirect. I still want the heat, but I don't want them to brown so fast before the body of the cauliflower gets thoroughly cooked.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can put a little bit of foil over the top of them just to stop them from getting that radiant heat, so that it stops them from getting the heat directly from the element, and they get it from the surrounding temperature.
Right. Or you could just bake it at 500 degrees instead of broil it. Yeah. But broiling does crisp the top. And even better if you have a convection oven, that can add a little bit more. And that's exactly what I did is I put them under the broiler for about 30 minutes. In the last 10 minutes, I turned on convection, and that really crisped up the edges of the cauliflower.
Lovely.
So 40 minutes later, I take it out, and I cooled it off a little bit because I'm going to put it into the food processor. And if it's too hot, there might be a little too much steam, which could condense and turn into water and all of that. So I wanted to just cool it off a little bit, but I did add about 3 tablespoons of butter.
Butter.
And a little heavy cream. Just a little squirt, maybe a couple tablespoons. And that all went into the food processor, and it came out the consistency of hummus.
Ah, yeah. So slightly grainy, but delicious.
Yeah. And with intense flavor, like not your typical mashed potato that you could just eat tons and tons and tons of. This is like seriously dense flavor.
Yeah.
And that roasted cauliflower flavor. And it comes out brown,
Yeah. Yeah. And you have a small spoonful and the flavor lasts in your mouth for minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a different experience from mashed potatoes, but it's better.
That sounds awesome. I'm gonna have to make that. I think I'm gonna have you're making me want to have a Thanksgiving in Australia. You know that, don't you?
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
So cranberry relish, cranberry sauce, that's a staple of Thanksgiving in America.
Okay.
And there are two kinds typically that people will buy. There's the jelly, which it comes in a can and it just goes and it pops out in a perfect can form.
I know, I've seen that.
There might be a few cranberries whole in there, but probably not. It's just a jelly.
It's stuck on a plate in the middle of the table. And it's all can shaped.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and then there's cranberry sauce, which people will typically either make on a stovetop by boiling down cranberries with sugar and a little water.
Because they're very tart. So
they're very tart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, cranberry sauce that comes in a can also, but is more like a sauce, right?
Right.
So, however, my mother has been making both the cranberry sauce and a cranberry relish from fresh cranberries.
Okay.
And she has been made ever since I was 2. I can't remember a time when we didn't have this. And she sweetens it with orange juice and puts orange zest in it. And of course, some sugar of some kind. Later on in her life, she would use honey or agave nectar, supposed good sugars.
Good sugars.
Yeah, good sugars.
Carl, of course, is using scare quotes around good sugars.
Yeah, that's right. So, and she also added a little ginger to it, which is a really good combination with cranberry. Well, anyway, I did the same, except that I added, instead of orange juice, a little lemon juice and the zest of an entire lemon.
Yeah, nice.
And to prepare the cranberries, I blanched them in boiling water. In other words, I put them in water, brought it to a boil, and then just let them sit for like a minute, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that they wouldn't cook, but they would blanch a little bit. It
softens the outside skin, yeah.
Yeah. And then I strained that, put them in the food processor with the zest and a little lemon juice and sweetener to taste. And I didn't go overboard with the sweetener, and here's why. First of all, we're ketogenic. We don't need really, really sweet stuff.
No.
Secondly, you really need that acid to cut through all the fat of the rich gravy and the turkey and the mash, you know? And just a little bit. Turned out everybody loved it. You just use a little bit of it. And it's relatively fresh tasting because they're fresh cranberries. They're not cooked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering where I'm going to get fresh cranberries in Australia. I'm going to see how I go. Yeah.
I could send you some, but I'd probably get arrested.
Yeah. Smuggle it in a boogie board bag. No, I think I might be able to find a source. I know I lived in Sweden for 2 years, and when I was younger, and we used to have a relish there called lingonberries, or I think they're sometimes called cowberries. It's a very similar to a cranberry, yeah. And I think I saw a sugar-free lingonberry paste, a lingonberry spread in the delicatessen recently. So I'll see if I can find that, because lingonberries would do the same thing. They're not as tart as cranberries, but they have that. They'll cut through that fattiness of your meal.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
And my mother's Swedish, so she's all about lingonberries. Yeah, and that's probably why she was so into the cranberry relish too.
Yeah, I love it. I've got it. I mean, if I can find fresh cranberries, I will totally make this and jar it up and store it for autumn. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Okay, there's one more thing that I made that I need to talk about, and then I will hand it over to you because you've got some great recipes too. And that is the low-carb pumpkin cheesecake mousse from sugarfreemom.com.
Nice. So you've got to have pumpkin pie at a Thanksgiving, and this is probably the closest you're going to get to a pumpkin pie, right? That's a traditional.
Right. If I had more time, I would have made a keto crust like out of pecans and erythritol and butter, but I didn't do that. And I did use a different sweetener than they say here.
Okay.
They use vanilla liquid stevia.
Okay.
And I didn't. I used Sucrin Gold, which is an erythritol stevia blend, but it is brown sugar-ish.
So it's got like a molasses essence added to
the
artificial sweetener. So I have seen it.
Yeah.
I've just never used it.
Yep, and I used it for the first time, and it really works well with pumpkin. I mean, if you think about it, any kind of spice, pumpkin spice thing is going to work really well with them. Yeah. So here are the ingredients. You need 2 8-ounce packages of cream cheese at room temperature.
Okay.
You need a 15-ounce can of pure pumpkin, not the pumpkin pie filling, but just pure pumpkin puree. Mm-hmm. Just a can of pumpkin.
Yeah.
2 cups of heavy cream, a pinch of salt, 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, 1 to 2 teaspoons of vanilla liquid stevia or to taste, and I just used the Sucrin Gold to taste. I think I ended up with 3/4 of a cup of it at the end.
Okay.
1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, but of course use more because vanilla is awesome. I don't know. And you can optionally top it with cacao nibs or a little Sucrin Gold.
Okay.
But those are the ingredients.
So for people outside of America, pumpkin spice is, I guess you could, Quattro pieces, the French sweet 4-spice blend would probably be closest, but it's really, I guess, cinnamon, nutmeg,
cloves, and allspice.
Oh, and allspice, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but in America, everything this time of the year is pumpkin spice flavor, and pumpkin spice is one word.
Yes, it's really embarrassing. I know.
It's delicious.
Pumpkin spice lattes at Starbucks are all the rage. Yeah. So here are the instructions. You start with a KitchenAid or a stand mixer, and you blend the cream cheese and the pumpkin until smooth. Now, this is cream cheese at room temperature. I didn't start with mine at room temperature, and guess what happened?
Yeah, clump.
I got little bits of cream cheese all throughout the mix.
Oh, well.
Yeah, well. So live and learn. So now you just add the rest of the ingredients and blend until whipped and fully fluffy, or about 5 minutes. And what's great about this is that the cream actually whips. You actually get the whipped cream effect, so it lightens it up.
Aerates it.
Yeah, and just adjust your flavors as needed. I added more pumpkin pie spice. I added more Sucrin Gold. I added more salt than they said because, we're keto and we need more salt.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable. Wow. Everybody liked it.
I'm so going to do that too. I'm going to do this entire meal.
Yeah. So that's what I got, Richard. Hey, should we play the recipes theme?
Recipes!
It's time for recipes!
Recipes.
A little late, but okay.
This entire show is recipes. I'm going to do a recipe. Now, in Australia, we don't have Thanksgiving. What we have is the day after Christmas. It's called Boxing Day in Australia. It's a holiday. You have the day off. And we have a lot of sporting events that all start on that day. There's a big Boxing Day cricket match in Melbourne, where if the English are coming out, then it's the big Ashes match. It's a 5-day sporting event where the most likely outcome is a no result. And and then it's kind of like baseball. Imagine it taking 5 days.
Yeah, I know.
So there's the cricket, and then there's a big sailing race, the Sydney to Hobart yacht race, which is down the eastern seaboard of Australia, which is quite a dangerous race. So that's all very exciting. And so what happens on Boxing Day? All these sporting events start, and you've just had Christmas. You had your family over for some of your family over for Christmas. The ones you like, the ones you don't like, all turn up on Boxing Day, and you basically sit around and eat leftovers and watch sport and fall asleep on the couch in front of the sport. So my experience of Thanksgiving in America was that's pretty similar to a Thanksgiving.
Yeah, very similar. We just try to eat everything in sight.
That's it. It's a competitive eating event. So what we often do in Christmas time in Australia is middle of summer.
Right.
Absolute height of summer. And it's insane because we have these English traditions that we follow of having a ham and having a goose or a turkey or, a large chicken and lots of hot, stodgy food. It's the middle of summer. But we also, we'll have things like shrimp. So you've heard this
shrimp
the
on the
phrase
barbie.
Shrimp on the barbie. So we'll have shrimp often on Boxing Day. But what we do like to do is we like to cook a ham and then let it go cold and then slice and have cold cuts of basically ham.
Yeah, we do the same thing with ham in America. At least in my family, we did. We had a turkey and a ham, usually, and both at Thanksgiving and Christmas. For those who celebrate Christmas, we did.
And you eat the ham hot or cold?
Both. So it starts hot and then it sits out. And then by about midnight, when people get peckish, they start making ham sandwiches with the rolls,
Fair enough. So I'll give you our recipe. This is one that Julie's been doing for us ever since we went low carb. We get a leg ham, a large leg ham, and we peel the skin back from the top. And you're basically separating that fat layer. So you're ending up with a little bit of fat in the skin, but most of the fat's on the meat itself. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lay a dressing on that meat. And we're going to use miso and apple cider vinegar. And it's basically we're going to make an apple miso dressing on the top of that fat. And
I'm trying to imagine what that tastes like, and it tastes pretty good in my imagination.
It's it basically turns that fat into a very protein flavor, umami sort of. Difficult to describe, but so we use 2 tablespoons of white miso. You can get miso it's a fermented soy mash. So you can get white miso or red miso. It's an Asian, usually a Japanese ingredient. But you get 2 tablespoons of white miso. You get about 1.5 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. And this is to thin out the miso.
Right.
We add, instead of adding apple juice to it, which is what you traditionally do, we add 7 drops of apple flavoring essence, which is an oil-based essence that gives a very strong flavor of apple without any of the glucose, without any of the sugar, fructose, and glucose.
Where do you get all these essences? You had an essence of pineapple too, right?
Yeah, I use there's a website that specializes in these. I think a lot of people use them for baking, for making flavored icing mixes.
Yeah, okay.
So you add a little bit of the oil essence to the icing, and so you end up with mint flavored icing or pineapple flavored icing, apple flavored icing. So that's really where I get these from. But I'll put the link to the place that Julie buys them from. And so we use 7 drops of apple flavored essence, 1.5 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, and the white miso, and you paint that on top of that fat on the ham.
Wow.
And then you put the skin back on top of it, and the skin basically is going to stop it from burning, and it's going to cook all of that miso into the fat. And I've got some little sticks that are traditionally used for eating a corn cob. We don't eat corn anymore since we've gone low carb. So I just jam them straight into the skin to stick it to the meat.
Yeah.
I smoke meat often, and so I'll often have a ham in the middle rack just for 30 minutes to get some smoky flavor in.
Right.
Then I put it in the oven, and I cook it for about an hour on low temperature in the oven. And the whole point of that is for the fat to not quite render so it drips out liquid, but it cooks down just a little bit with the flavors. And so you end up with a really flavorsome bark around the outside of your ham.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And some of the flavor goes through it. So that's Julie's miso apple ham.
Sounds so good.
And I'll put links in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm not hungry, but I could totally have a bite of that right now. No problem.
So that's my recipe. And you've spent the whole day with giving us recipes.
Yeah. I sort of felt obligated to, since you really didn't have the Thanksgiving experience, at least not all that much, and don't really have the turkey and stuffing down under, but I sort of, and believe me, it was no sacrifice on my part. I enjoy nothing more than spending the whole day shopping, cooking, and then eating a meal with my friends. It's like a perfect day.
And it's awesome because at least 30% of our listeners are outside of America. So this gives everyone an opportunity to have a Thanksgiving weekend.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah.
It's really all about just good food and friends and family.
And having gone through the keto adventure since January that you have, both of us have been through the keto adventure, we've got plenty of reasons to be thankful.
Yes, we do. I'm thankful for you, my friend.
And I'm thankful for your meal because I'm going to get it in my belly.
All right. So that's the show, Richard.
Yeah. If you've got anything that you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something that you don't agree with, or some more research that you've found to support or refute what we've said, send it by email to dudes@2ketodudes.com or post it on our website.
Or you can follow us on Twitter at 2KetoDudes or on Instagram at 2KetoDudes. And our blog is blog.2keto.com. Our recipe archive is at recipes.2keto.com. Hey, the Fathead Pizza is at pizza.2keto.com. The chocolate mousse is at mousse.2keto.com. And the list goes on and on. A list of links. Critical Science is at links.2keto.com.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening.
We hope you get as much out of this information as we do in putting it together.
You know, 2 Keto Dudes doesn't take advertising revenue. We have no benefactors with hidden agendas.
That's right. It's listeners like you who keep our lights on.
There are a few ways you can support us, all of which are listed on our website at 2ketodudes.com/support.
Thanks again.
And we'll see you next time on 2 Keto Dudes.